All right, let's dive into this explainer and blow the dust off a truly remarkable historical artifact that genuinely serves as a modern survival guide. Imagine for a second being the absolute most powerful person on the planet. But instead of kicking back in some luxurious, comfortable palace, you are freezing your toes off in a muddy military camp, totally surrounded by hostile forces, a deadly plague, and political betrayal. How on earth do you keep from losing your mind? Well, today I'm putting on my history professor hat to analyze the private diary of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. We're going to look at exactly how he actively applied Stoic principles, not in some quiet, peaceful classroom, but out on the brutal front lines of a massive war. Here is our lecture syllabus for today. First, we'll cover an emperor under siege. Second, the secret battlefield journal. Third, retreating into the soul. Fourth, the wrestler's philosophy. And finally, lessons from the front lines. Okay, let's kick things off with part 1, an emperor under siege. And we're opening the scene not in a peaceful marble-floored Roman villa, but in the freezing mud and blood of the northern frontier. To really put this into perspective, when Marcus took the throne back in 1601 AD, it literally felt like the world was ending. Wars just broke out on all sides almost immediately. In the east, the Parthians invaded. And then, it gets worse, the legions sent to stop them actually brought back this devastating pestilence that just ravaged the empire. We're talking widespread starvation and absolute panic. By 1690 AD, his co-emperor, Lucius Verus, dies right in the middle of these grueling campaigns. And if all that wasn't enough, massive coalitions of northern tribes, chief among them the Marcomanni and the Quadi, shattered the Roman frontier. He was fighting desperate battles for years, including that famous miraculous event in 1704 AD against the Quadi, where his trapped, dying army was saved by a sudden thunderstorm. They were literally called the Thundering Legion forever after that. The thing you really have to understand is that Marcus was not just some philosopher lounging around in a toga. He was an equestrian military commander, actively leading his army from the front lines. He actually had to sell off the imperial jewels just to fund his defense of the empire. By nature, this was a gentle guy. He deeply valued his philosophical studies, he loved his family, but duty called him to the freezing mud of the Danube River, where he spent years trying to stabilize a completely crumbling border against fierce barbarian hordes. And just imagine the extreme pressure here. He's trying to lead this fractured, totally undisciplined military against terrifying northern tribes, all while his own health was famously, terrible. According to letters from his friend and former tutor, Fronto, when Marcus took command, the army was in rough shape. They were sunken in luxury, completely corrupted by long inactivity. We're talking horses that were hairy from lack of grooming, rampant gambling in the camps, and guards who were literally sleeping or drinking while on watch. He had to rebuild the discipline and spirit of this corrupt force totally from scratch. Which brings us to Section 2, the secret battlefield journal. Let's see how all of this unimaginable stress actually led to the creation of one of the most famous texts in human history, written right there in the military camps. In the absolute darkest moments, surrounded by the chaos of a rowdy, terrified military camp, Marcus would sit down by lamplight and write. He told himself to look up and follow the course of the stars as if he were running right alongside them. He wrote that these kinds of cosmic imaginations help much to purge away the dross and filth of earthly life. And man, he was surrounded by filth. The mud, the disease, the endless logistics of war were constantly threatening to pull him under. He desperately needed that cosmic perspective just to maintain his sanity. So the really crucial point here is that we are looking over the shoulder of the most powerful man in the world, reading the exact mental tactics he used to survive staggering external pressure. The book we now call Meditations was a private survival guide. It was never, ever meant to be published. He wasn't trying to impress future generations or lay down some rigid system for students. He wrote it for himself. He was literally drilling his own soul, repeating core Stoic principles over and over until they became his default reaction to crisis. Moving right along to Section 3, retreating into the soul. So how exactly did he cope with all that mud, blood, and betrayal? Let's look at his primary defensive maneuver. When the battlefield got deafening, he deliberately trained his mind to just retreat inward. People always want to seek physical escapes when they're stressed, right? A vacation, a trip to the mountains. But Marcus realized that true escape isn't geographical at all. It's totally mental. He writes that if you have prepared your mind beforehand with the right principles, you can withdraw into your own soul at a moment's notice and instantly find perfect ease and tranquility, even in the middle of a war zone. He was basically teaching himself to build what Stoics call the inner citadel. Think of it as this impregnable place of refuge right inside your mind. It's a strong fortress, totally free from wild passions. No matter what the Marcomanni tribes were doing outside, no matter how badly the plague was raging, those things could not forcefully enter his mind unless he specifically gave them permission. By maintaining this inner citadel, a leader stays clear-headed and effective instead of just panicking with everyone else.
And this was his core tactical maneuver, drawing a hard, continuous line between the uncontrollable elements of the war and the only things he actually possessed power over. He meticulously divided his reality into two columns. He absolutely could not control his failing physical health. He couldn't control the invading Marcomanni, the weather, the global plague, or what anyone else thought of him. But what could he control? His own opinions, his own desires and dislikes, whether he chose to act with justice. He reminded himself constantly that anxiety only comes from trying to control that uncontrollable column. True power comes from mastering the controllable one.
Next up is Section 4, the wrestler's philosophy. And I love this part because this mental retreat wasn't about being soft or passive at all. It was deeply physical and combative in its nature. We always kind of wish life would be this beautifully choreographed dance, right? Where everyone knows their steps, the music is totally predictable, and everything just goes smoothly. But Marcus, sitting in a gritty Roman war camp, realized that leadership, and honestly life itself, is actually a wrestling match. A leader simply cannot expect a predictable dance. You have to have a wrestler's mindset. You need to be braced for sudden, unexpected impacts. You have to stand steadfast against violent forces and make sure absolutely nothing can cast you down. And he really needed this mindset, because during the Parthian Wars, one of his most trusted, able generals, a guy named Avidius Cassius, heard a false rumor that Marcus had died and immediately tried to usurp his throne. It was a massive, sudden betrayal. But because Marcus was braced like a wrestler, he wasn't thrown off balance. He didn't fly into a blind rage. He just stood firm. His ultimate goal here was a concept called apathy. Now, actually, scratch that. Don't think of the modern word apathy. It's not about being numb or not caring. Marcus cared deeply. He wept when his own children died, and he worked tirelessly for Rome. But apathy meant he absolutely refused to let those external events dictate his internal weather. It's the Stoic ideal of total calmness in all circumstances. He remained a steady, unshakable center of gravity, no matter how wildly the circumstances spun out of control around him.
Let's bring this all home with Section 5, Lessons from the Front Lines. We're going to step back from the ancient text and apply this battlefield philosophy directly to our own modern leadership challenges. This sets up a really clear choice for us tonight. Are you a reactive leader tossed around by every single market shift, or are you a stoic leader converting obstacles into fuel? Think about it. When a crisis hits, the reactive mind instantly complains. It gets suspicious, it gets completely overwhelmed by daily disasters. But the stoic leader, taking a page right out of Marcus's journal, looks at an obstacle and says, "This is actually an opportunity for me to practice patience or courage or justice." As Marcus wrote, a raging fire turns everything thrown into it into flame and brightness. That is the mindset we have to cultivate.
And this is exactly why this matters to you today. His internal victory over his own mind directly led to his external success in stabilizing the Roman Empire for another 2 centuries. If Marcus Aurelius could figure out a way to live well and happy while freezing in a tent, fighting off barbarian hordes, and dealing with treason, well, we really have no excuse, do we? Whether you are in a boardroom, a classroom, or just trying to manage the daily chaos of your own house, the power to live with dignity and calm is entirely 100% within your own mind. That is the ultimate paradox of Marcus Aurelius, a gentle philosopher king who deeply desired peace, yet forged his absolute greatness in the freezing mud of enemy camps. He didn't choose his circumstances. He didn't ask for the plague, or the famines, or the endless wars, but he chose his response. He chose to be a good man in a genuinely terrible time. So, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder the next time you feel completely overwhelmed by external pressures. When your inbox is flooded, when a project totally fails, when your own metaphorical Marcomanni tribes are at the gates and chaos surrounds you, where do you retreat? Have you built an inner citadel? Because as history proves over and over again, sometimes the greatest battles we fight aren't against the forces outside us, but the chaos within. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, keep your mind braced and keep building that citadel.